So something big just happened that's going to affect a lot of people. And honestly, it's probably not getting the clear, straightforward explanation it deserves. President Trump won a major victory in the Supreme Court. I don't mean politically, I mean legally, structurally, historically. One part of the ruling might even reshape how birthright citizenship works in the US, at least for now. But the effects don't stop there. This ruling touches on how much power the courts have, how far the president's decisions can go, and how everyday rights might work differently depending on where you live. Now, this isn't one of those distant, abstract things. If you're a parent, a senior, an immigrant, or just someone who cares about what rules the government can and can't enforce, this matters big time. So, if you want to understand what just changed and how it could affect you or people you care about, stay tuned. We're going to go through what happened, what it means, and what could be coming next. So, here's what happened. The Supreme Court just ruled 6-3 that federal district courts can't issue nationwide injunctions unless it's part of certified class action. Now, that might sound technical, and it is, but stick with me because what it actually does is take away one of the biggest tools that lower courts have used to block controversial executive orders from taking effect nationwide. In short, it means when someone sues over a federal policy, the court can't just stop that policy across the entire country unless it follows very specific legal procedures. And the first big impact of that, Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship is now allowed to take effect in 28 states because those states weren't involved in the lawsuits that try to block it. Yeah, that's where we're at. Now, let's break that down. For over 150 years, the US has followed the rule that if you're born here, you're a citizen. That's been true even if your parents aren't citizens. It comes from the 14th Amendment passed right after the Civil War and confirmed in an 1898 Supreme Court case involving the child of Chinese immigrants. So when President Trump signed an order trying to deny citizenship to kids born in the U.S. to undocumented immigrants or even foreign nationals who don't have green cards, it was immediately challenged in court. And for good reason. Many saw it as unconstitutional based on over a century of legal precedent. Judges in places like Seattle and Maryland agreed, calling the order blatantly unconstitutional and issuing nationwide injunctions to stop it. But now with the new Supreme Court ruling, those blocks are limited. If your state didn't participate in the lawsuit, the policy can go into effect there, meaning the same child born in California and Arizona might have completely different legal statuses just based on which court cases applied to which states. That kind of legal patchwork creates a lot of uncertainty and confusion. Imagine being a new parent and not knowing if your child will be a citizen depending on where you delivered. It's not a small thing, and it's not just about this one policy either. What's more, this ruling potentially opens the door for other executive orders, many of which have been stalled or blocked, to move forward again. We're talking about voter ID mandates, education policies targeting diversity programs, and even efforts to freeze large amounts of federal funding for programs that aren't aligned with certain administration goals. These aren't hypotheticals, they're real policies that have been on pause. Now, the Supreme Court's decision didn't say those policies are automatically valid, but it did change the rules about how quickly or broadly courts can stop them. That gives the executive branch, especially under President Trump, a lot more room to act without being immediately shut down across the board. Now, there are two very different perspectives on this ruling. Supporters say it restores balance, that courts shouldn't have the power to block a president's decision for the entire country based on one local case. They say it prevents judges from becoming unelected gatekeepers who can override national policy. President Trump himself called the decision a win for the Constitution and the rule of law, but critics, especially from the more liberal justices, warned that this weakens protections for individual rights. Justice Sonia Sotomayor delivered a rare oral dissent, calling the ruling a threat to the rule of law. She said, "If a policy is unconstitutional, it shouldn't be allowed in some states just because the case didn't include everyone." Yet her point was some rights should apply to everyone, not just the people who made it into the first lawsuit. And you know what's weird? Both sides kind of have a point. Yeah, courts shouldn't have too much unchecked power. But also, people shouldn't be punished just because they live in a state that didn't file a lawsuit fast enough. So there's tension here between fairness and structure, between protecting rights and respecting legal process. And then there's the question of what comes next. Right now, the Trump administration hasn't provided much clarity on how this birthright citizenship change will actually be enforced. Reporters asked, will hospitals check immigration status? Will children born in certain states be denied social security numbers or passports? There weren't a lot of answers. The administration said that it'll be worked out in time, but in the meantime, there's a lot of legal limbo. Some nonprofit groups are already warning about a flood of lawsuits and preparing for class action cases to reestablish protections. Others worry that we're headed for a chaotic period where laws are interpreted differently from one state to the next. And if you're wondering, how did we even get here? Well, it's partly because Congress hasn't really updated or clarified these rules. So when there's a power vacuum, the executive branch steps in, the courts respond, and we end up with these big showdowns, and now the rules of that game have changed. One thing that's pretty striking is how quickly this could affect not just immigration, but education, healthcare, civil rights, you name it. Because if a single lawsuit can't stop a policy from going into effect nationwide anymore, then a lot of things could move forward before the courts finish reviewing them. The whole timing changes. So then what does this mean for you? Well, even if you're not directly affected by the birthright citizenship issue, this ruling might shape the government policies that reach your state, your family, or your finances in the future. Maybe that's a new ID rule that makes it harder to vote. Maybe it's a healthcare rule that impacts access in your area. Or maybe it's something that doesn't affect you now, but will down the line when the same logic is applied to a different kind of policy. And that's why it's important to understand this. It's not just about one court case or one executive order. It's about the rules for how power works in this country. And when those rules change, everything else is fair game too. Now, I know this stuff can feel heavy, but it really does matter. So if you have questions or if you've seen things changing already where you live, drop a comment and share your story. I read through those and try to respond when I can, and your experience might help someone else out too. And if you found this helpful, maybe send it to a friend or someone you know who'd want a clear explanation of what's going on. We don't always get that in the headlines. So yeah, this ruling didn't end the fight over birthright citizenship. Not even close. But it did change the battleground. And what happens next might surprise you. Make sure you're subscribed so we can follow it together. But there's more coming.